Now we're going to start looking at design documents and how to create effective designs. And, when we think about the requirements that we have, and let's just say one of our requirements was, I need a registration screen that has a name input, an email address input, phone number input, press OK, and it submits to the database. Well, just by having that requirement, I can get something that looks like what's over here on the left. I can have something that looks like what's over here on the right. And maybe what's on the right here isn't fully optimized, and there's further capability to refine that. But technically, when I look at what my requirement is versus what I was given, I have something that meets all my requirements. It just looks horrible to have something where your boxes aren't all lined up and your OK buttons all the way over here and so forth. So it's very important to have a design done, and a lot of people will skip a design phase and say, let's just get to building, let's do this as fast as we possibly can, and we'll iterate. And by not taking the time up front to do a design, they end up getting something like this with their output. And maybe not as drastic, but in other ways, they're very simple instances where you're not going to get what it is you think you're getting, even though you called it out, but because the time wasn't invested up front. So when we think about successful designs, they should contain as much detail as possible, because the more that is out there, the less chance that there's going to be room for misinterpretation. If there is room for interpretation or misinterpretation, chances are you are not going to get exactly what it is you think you're getting. And that leaves a lot of room for requirements along the way. You also want to make sure that the design phase is outlining key design decisions and when to address them. So, if we had a design, and I jump back to my previous slide, and your developer or UI designer told you, hey, look, I can create either what's on the left here or what's on the right here. What is it that you want? When it comes time to them building everything and showing it to you in the testing phase or during development, you would say, hey, look, is this exactly what I thought I was getting? If it's outlined and designed, there's less chance that you're going to get something like what's on the left here as your finished product. Just keep in mind that a lot of people will try to skip design to cut time out of a timeline or to save money, but in that there are going to be a lot of instances like what I just outlined that you're going to see, and not just from what the application looks like, but also from how it interacts with your end users, how the application logic happens, and so forth. So just make sure that your any decisions around you could take option A or B, that those are being presented during design, and that you're avoiding those room for misinterpretation. Use mock-ups wherever possible, and what you see is what you should get. It's not always the case, but having things mocked up will reduce the chance for error and rework having to happen, right? So you can get very advanced with your UI design, for example, and have all the colors and shapes and everything all outlined and perfect in there, or you can simplify it a little bit to reduce some of the amount of time that it takes. So maybe you're not showing all the colors, you're tweaking colors during development stage or testing, but during design you show it without the color, or just show a very simplified version of the interface. I've found that for a lot of application logic that happens, especially things that are involve computations like up fields, things like that. I've had a lot of success with mocking up application logic in Excel. And it's a great way if you can visually show your developer something that is working and calculating to your expected result. It's a great way to avoid any kind of misinterpretation that they may have when they're building the applications out there. They can see, here's my source, here's what logic is happening on that source, here's what the end result is. If I can replicate the same end result using the same source, then I know that my logic is working. And just in terms of format, I see a lot of design documents that come in Word format, PowerPoint format, Google Docs. The format doesn't really matter. It's a matter of preference, just as long as you have everything outlined. So what should be, what should be in the design document? What is the purpose of the design? It should outline all the work that's going to be performed during this phase, and that's things like the different screens that you're going to have in your user interface, the application logic, what the database is going to look like, what the data is going to have, etc. It should outline the design decisions, and not just outline the design decisions, but explain what it is that, like when you need that decision made. Is this something that you need to make during design? Is this something that you need to make during build? Are there prototypes required before you can kind of make that decision, etc.? This is going to feed into your project plan, so that way you can add more details to the tasks. Because once you have a design and you say it's going to be 5 screens, now you can add into your project plan, create screen 1, create screen 2, create screen 3, and so forth. Same thing with your databases, what tables you're going to need, application, what modules are you going to need to build, etc. So a very important thing that often gets overlooked is that your design should map to your requirements template so that you can ensure that all the requirements that you've called out and that you've defined as being in scope are accounted for in that. What's going to happen is, at the end of the project, you're going to go through your testing, you're going to look and say, hey, this feature is missing. And your developer is going to say, well, the design, was everything that we thought we had to build, right? And you're going to go back and say, well, that's not what I asked for, and so forth. So by having, a mapping of here's my requirement, or having your developer specify in the design, here's what requirements we're covering, you now can have peace of mind that all your requirements are being accounted for. You want to make sure that you're minimizing any surprises during a project. You're never going to guarantee having no surprises. Things always come up, but you want to try to minimize wherever it's inside your control. And just also keep in mind that during design, you might have these, I'll call them mini POCs, where if an idea is, you're not sure, is this feasible or not? You can have, like maybe, hey, let's take a day, let's build out a sample of that, or see how this will look, or see if this is possible, just to make sure that as you get to build, you're not going to hit any major issues along the way. In terms of what needs to be designed and what should be in your design document, you should definitely have the application architecture. It's going to be the hardware and software requirements. It's going to be any servers you're going to use, how it's set up. Am I doing this in AWS? Am I doing this in DigitalOcean, in Azure? How many servers I'm going to need? What type of server it's going to be? Is this a database? Is this an application server? Is it Windows? Is it Linux? Is it all that kind of stuff? You want to make sure that as much as you know about in this document, because what's going to happen is once your developers are ready to build, then they're going to say, okay, well, where are the servers that you want me to code this on? Is this set up? Is that set up? Do I have the username and password for this? So you want to make sure that if you outline everything that is required, that you can get your development team access to everything in a timely fashion. You want to make sure you're designing your UI. Make sure that it's indicated and that you ask for a UI that's responsive. Responsive just means that if you look at the websites, this is if you have a web-based application, if you look at it on a phone or tablet, it's going to look just as good as if you look on a desktop computer. If you're pulling data in from other sources, you want to make sure that that's all accounted for in the design. Where's the data coming from? If there are any specific API calls or file locations that you're pulling the data from, what's the source? What's the target? Where's this data going to? Are there any transformations that need to happen where you're changing what the data is or looks like in your source by the time it gets to your target? You want to map all of that out as well. Obviously, application logic that you're going to have, take this, do this, have someone log in, do all of that. You don't have to get down to the level of actually writing code in there, but you just want to make sure that from a high level, you've accounted for here is what's going to happen inside the application. If there is something that's tricky about the application or there is information you want to provide in the sense of code or Excel formulas or whatever, by all means put that logic in there. It's just that you don't necessarily have the code written out at that point. That's what the development phase is for. Security, you want to make sure that you have a full security matrix that's that you're making available in this design document. Who is going to have access to the application? Are there different roles that are required for it? What does each role do? What is each role restricted from? How the security gets updated and maintained, those types of things. And finally, testing. It's great if you can start thinking about a test plan and maybe just some high-level tests in terms of this is what's going to have to be tested and all that. But just know that a lot of people and even large companies they defer thinking about testing or designing the testing to when they're in the build or test phase. And just some general tips to provide you with, just look to simplify wherever possible. You can get very granular in detail in the design document, but you just want to always balance how much is too much detail where, now you're delaying starting, building the application because you're designing it versus being able to jump right in. You want to make sure that you can, still provide enough detail where you show the idea of what's happening and show that it's possible and here is how we're going to accomplish it without getting into too much detail where it's starting to delay your project. Also use your design phase to prove out feasibility on key concepts that you have, and make sure you double and triple check to make sure that all requirements are captured and accounted for in your design. Have the developers label each design element with what requirements it relates to, which will save you time and help as you look at what did I ask for, what didn't I ask for, things like that. If you get your design document sent to you, just make sure that you're scheduling a review meeting with the development team on a call. It's very easy to get a document and read through it and say this sounds like what I want, but you want to make sure that the two of you are communicating. If there are things that need clarification, you're getting your questions answered. Those clarifications. Don't rely on a development team on a phone call to tell you, oh yeah, that's what I meant. If there are clarifications that are required, make them update the documentation to reflect those changes. And then, just make sure you leave that meeting with an idea of, what hardware is going to be required, what's the estimated cost for it to set up. That'll just give you a sense of how many servers do I need, how much is it going to cost for the servers, do I have the budget related to keeping the servers up. The last thing that you want is in the middle of development, you run out of money for the project because you thought you were going to spend $50 a month on servers and you're spending $1,000 a month, and now you have to cancel the entire project because you can't pay the server bill. Also just make sure that it doesn't have to necessarily be called out in the design document, but that the development team is thinking of application performance in here as well, because there's some applications where you may need things to be calculated sub-second. Others, if it takes an hour, it's not the end of the world, but just make sure that as the application build starts, which will be in your next phase, that what is considered reasonable in terms of how long things should take is documented somewhere.